All right. It looks like we're live. So, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Wisdom and Grit. My goal with this show is to introduce you to the men who build the world and create lives of impact so that we can celebrate them and work together to fulfill the call of masculinity in our homes, our communities, and the world. I'm your host, Corey Huddleston, and in today's episode is going to be a tribute to the men and women who gave it all to serve our country and to protect our freedoms and honor the families that they have left behind. Just coming in after Memorial Day, and this was a great time to bring in our next guest, who happens to be a Marine veteran and founder of a organization called Survived Inc. and Dear Calvin Project. So in 2012, he enlisted into the Marine Corps straight out of high school, and after basic training, he was shipped to Fallujah, Iraq on a 14-month deployment to support Operation Iraqi Freedom, and what would also go on to be remembered as the bloodiest battle since Gettysburg. Upon returning back to the U.S., he was sent to 29 Palms, California as an instructor controller at Mojave Viper, where he trained deploying units in anti-terrorism measures. After being honorably discharged in 2015, he would go on to start Dear Calvin Project and Survive Inc. as an organizational movement that creates tribute videos to honor the lives of the fallen soldiers so that their legacy and memory can carry on in living color with their children inside of these Gold Star families. He is down to earth, sincere, and generous. Please help me in welcoming my friend, Charlie Jones. Charlie, what's up, brother?
Hey, man, how you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
Man, I appreciate you being here. So I'm excited about this show today because I grew up in a very patriotic home, multiple family members, went on to serve in the military. And to me, the idea of Memorial Day is so much more than a barbecue. It's so much more than time out with your friends, drinking beer, whatever it is, and it's this opportunity to really reflect on and teach our children, what it actually takes to preserve the freedoms that are in our country. And so this is such a huge deal to me, and I know so many of the men inside of Wisdom and Grit, man. So first of all, thank you for your service, and for all the men and women watching here today. This is we appreciate you and honor you. So
I appreciate that a lot, man. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Memorial Day is kind of it's a strange holiday, because it's a happy day, but it's also sort of a sad day at the same time. I always try to think of it as just like a day of remembrance rather than go down and have a party or whatever, like on New Year's or something. But yeah, it's an interesting holiday. Never really had that kind of impact on me until after I had joined the Marines. A lot of things changed, but that was certainly one of them mentally. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine. So tell me a little about yourself, because going into the military, obviously is a huge decision for, as a young man going in. So did you grow up in a patriotic home, or kind of what was the trigger for kind of upbringing you into that environment?
Yes and no. My father is an attorney, so certainly the law was always very important, and rules, respect, and things like that. I grew up in a very kind of a strict, old school house in that sense. My father and mother, neither one of them served. My grandfather did. He actually was awarded the Bronze Star during Korea. He was a helicopter pilot. But really, joining the military hadn't even really occurred to me until 9/11 for one. I remember very vividly where I was 9/11.
Everybody does, I think.
Yeah, right. Well, it's getting in the past now. It's sort of I know it's kind of funny because the younger generation doesn't necessarily remember it. It's kind of like Kennedy's assassination for like maybe your generation, or for some older people. But that was interesting to see kind of how that impacts everybody's lives. Yeah, my brother is 4 years older than me. His name is Rich, and he went to college right away and didn't do so well to begin with. A very smart guy. Just really couldn't find his way there, and it took him a long time. He was actually on academic probation for a semester, and then he joined ROTC right when he got back, and everything turned around for him. It turned around his grades, it turned around his social. He's much more social. I'm the loud extrovert in the family. He's the introvert. So it was really, he was getting in good shape, and he was it just really turned things around for him. And like I signed up my junior year of high school, so I was in the delayed entry program, which is kind of like preparing you to go sort of thing, up to a year. So I was about a year out when I joined, and I just really didn't know what I wanted to study yet in college. I was always planning on going to college. That was kind of the aim from the beginning. But I saw what happened to my brother, and I figured I didn't want to waste all my time and my parents' money going from major to major in college. So I figured I was try to make something of myself while I was figuring the next part of my life out. And it's funny because when I was at the recruiting station, after I told my parents I was 17, so they had to sign off with me. And like dad just kind of looks at me. He's like, you're going to Iraq, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay. So I just signed it. So words that really didn't know what they meant at the time, but I guess did my best to try and prepare myself for what was to come later on.
Yeah. So you ended up going into basic. Well, you graduated high school and went straight into the military at 17. You're saying, like, is that when you went in? Okay.
Yeah, I graduated.
So that was in 2003, right?
Yeah. I left July 20th, 2003 was my first day of boot camp.
Okay. Yeah, and so boot camp, what, 6 weeks, or is that
12?
Okay, 12 weeks, and then nearly immediately after, you ended up getting taken over to Fallujah, right? Or getting
there's 3 training evolutions you go through if you're not infantry.
Okay.
There's basic training, which everyone goes to. For non-infantry members, there's combat training, which is like 3 weeks of basically crash course infantry tactics, because everybody has to know that in the Marines. Is everyone's a rifleman. That's kind of the slogan. Yeah. And then you have your job training. So from California, at that point, I went to Missouri for a few months I was a motor transport operator, so I was a driver, learning how to drive 7-ton Humvees and things like that. So after that, there was 8 of us that came from my my schoolhouse that went to Camp Pendleton together, but we got split up, and actually only 2 of us, myself and this other guy, Sam Lott, ended up at 1st Marine Regiment, and everybody else went to Truck Company, which is a totally different unit. And we were 3 weeks later, we were in Kuwait.
Wow.
Yeah, so, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge shift, right? Going in, were you hitting the ground running automatically? I mean, they put you in the trucks, kind of driving through and doing the convoys and stuff, or?
Yeah, well, so we got to Kuwait where we did, because we were replacing 82nd Airborne when we got there.
Yeah.
So we got to Kuwait, and then we convoyed up to Fallujah after a few weeks of preparing the trucks and everything, because we were doing a change of command with the Army.
Gotcha.
So a few weeks later, we ended up, in Fallujah, on Camp Fallujah. And, I had actually gotten augmented right away to the security platoon as a driver. And for a lot of that time, I drove an ambulance, triaging people in and out of the dangerous zones right outside of, Fallujah. And so, it was a crazy job.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that more because that has a lot to do with kind of what we're talking about today. So when you went over into Kuwait and then ultimately into Fallujah, you were telling me earlier, we kind of hopped on a call, and I didn't realize this. I knew it was a pretty hardcore environment, but you were saying it was the bloodiest battle since Gettysburg.
Yeah,
which was if you know American history. So what was that like, kind of stepping into that, first of all, knowing you were going into that, or did you even know that was the case when you were going?
I knew as much as I could know.
Right.
Before I left. And it's a totally different experience when you show up. To be honest with you, I was very fortunate. I spent 14 months over in that area, and we didn't take a lot of contact considering the amount of time I was there.
Yeah.
But when you get there, like, it was still very basic on base. We had our areas and everything, but it's still like it was being built up, kind of, like with dirt berms and things like that. So get there, and it's just kind of adapting to another situation. It's totally different kind of way of life. It's amazing how quickly you get used to those things. So it's and then jumping right into the security elements of that, we were on 24/7 on call. As soon as they got a radio in, we had to be on the trucks within 2 minutes and out the gate. So it was a very kind of fast pace. But at that point in time, we were also taking a lot of like mortar fire throughout the night. Like you almost had your watch by, it was 8 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning. Basically, we would take mortars. They weren't like well aimed. They were usually set up to go off later on after the insurgents would, abandon their post or whatever. But yeah, you about 2 months of that, you get really scared all the time. And then after about 2 months, you're just so tired of being scared and worried all the time. It's just like, you know what, whatever, just concentrate on your job and do everything you can to make it through whatever, and it just, again, it's amazing how quickly you get used to different situations, over time.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. So, like, were you going, obviously you were headed outside of the base on a lot of those transports and stuff like that. So when you're going through those cities as a driver, I can imagine that's a pretty stressful job because like you're the guy they're trying to take out a lot of the times. It seems.
Yeah. The IEDs were always a really big concern. And that was the big killer for a long time, were roadside bombs, and saw several of those, got hit a couple times with those. Nothing really prepares you for an explosion right behind your truck, though. That was a very interesting experience. But again, you go out so many times. I mean, we did over like 300 convoys, so it was all the time, and you just get used to it, and like I said, for the first couple of months, I was, like crapping my pants every single time we go out, and getting caught up in all this crazy stuff, and it just becomes routine after a while. Surprisingly, you never really think that would be the case, but you adapt. People adapt very well to even the harshest of situations, and you just concentrate on your job, and that's the easiest way to get through and the safest way to get through it, honestly. Just pay attention to what you're doing and do your job.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you were over there and you were doing, I guess, a few different driving jobs, and then you ended up doing the medical transport and essentially driving the ambulance. So bringing the wounded back from hot spots throughout Fallujah. I'm assuming it's kind of how that went. Is that primarily what it was, or?
Yeah. So like, I was one of a couple of people that were licensed to drive the ambulance. So that's why I ended up going to that position right away, because I didn't have anybody at the time. And we had one other guy who was basically like an Alpha Bravo for me. Like Alpha, he was Bravo. So we switched off. But it was, I mean, I don't know. That was probably the hardest job I ever had, was driving, because it's fast paced all the time. You've got to get out there, you pick people up, you bring them back as fast as you can. And there was, like the tempo wise, there was a time when we went out and we picked up this critically wounded staff sergeant had gotten shot through the neck. And, we went out, we were in such a rush, to get him back to the surgical unit to save him, that the rear doors of the ambulance where the corpsman was working on the guy blew open because they weren't secured enough. And it sucked him backwards almost out of the truck.
Wow. And
there's this little like 3-stair like ladder that falls out the back, so to help with loading the gurneys. And his leg caught the last stair out the back, and he didn't miss a beat, still working on the guy with half his body hanging out the back end of an ambulance going 65 miles an hour. I actually have a picture of it, which is pretty funny, but you see his legs sticking all the way down by the ground. And, unfortunately, we weren't able to get the guy back in time. I mean, we did everything we possibly could. I mean, that was 65 miles an hour in a 7-ton or a Humvee. 65 miles an hour is like warp 10.
Yeah.
That's really fast. So, that was a kind of a hard day for everybody, especially Doc Book, who's the corpsman that was there with us, a good friend of mine, actually. But yeah, that was the kind of the tempo of everything. It would just be go, 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 go. And so you practice relentlessly every part of it, so that it's just muscle memory basically that you're relying on.
Yeah, so I'm sure I can imagine that's probably the hardest thing, is when you're sitting there trying to rescue these lives and they don't all make it back, which is obviously kind of what the whole show is about today. So like a lot
of them we did get back in time, which was good, and that was a credit to the training that we received and to the amazing corpsman staff from the Navy that we had. They were amazing guys. Doc Book's a good friend of mine. Like I said, I still talk with him, and just one of the bravest, coolest guys I've ever met. But very, very great at triage medicine and getting everybody back. We were all pretty well-oiled machine after a short period of time. So
Yeah.
it was successful more than it wasn't, but sometimes just nothing you can do.
So like I had my buddy Brian Fleming, he was on here. We had him interviewed him, I guess it's probably about a month and a half ago. And he was over in Iraq as well. And he was actually in 2 different IED explosions, roadside bombs and at separate times, and the last one, from what I understand, did pretty, almost took him out, I mean, like he was hurt and injured pretty well from that. And he was talking about how he went through this instance of like after that was happening and kind of came to, and the first things that kind of came to his head, were like, it wasn't, how's my family? It wasn't, hey, how's everybody doing? How am I doing? It was, what did I do? What have I been doing with my life? Have I made an impact in the lives of others? And I mean, at night, I think he said he was 19 years old or something when he had that realization, and I mean, that's a huge realization for somebody to have at such an early age, I think.
Sure.
And it shows in him because he's gone on to become a public speaker and helps a lot of people and that kind of stuff. But when we're especially on the ambulance thing, and you're working with a lot of people who were injured, and I don't know how critical and that type of thing, but was there any kind of standout moments similar to that maybe you'd like to share as far as like it's kind of what these guys were kind of going through, or along the way, or was there anything that?
There was. I mean, that time, especially like when we got back and we got the guy to the surgical unit when we found out that he had passed. That was a big moment for everybody because we did everything right, aside obviously for not the doors in the back of the ambulance, but other than that, there was another time I don't know, it's funny because you get into these situations where something detonates like that, it's completely unexpected, and you go into this autopilot mode,
right?
Like there's pure panic and chaos going on, but at the same time, like I was able to kind of pull myself out of it enough to be like I'm an autopilot until after the fact.
Yeah.
And usually, like we had one where we were driving from Balad down through Baghdad to Fallujah, and we were about maybe a couple of miles outside of Baghdad, and we got hit by an IED blast, a machine gun fire, RPGs, and this IED had detonated probably about 50 meters behind my truck. And after everything was done, after the security element went over and took care of business, we relinked back up. I started driving again, and then all of a sudden my heart starts racing, and I'm just driving regular, but it's just weird how it's like a delayed response to that, like such a surge of adrenaline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience as well. And we ended up losing a guy in that one too. And the one thing you don't ever want to hear is KIA over the comm. Everyone stops.
Yeah.
Everyone stops when they hear that. It doesn't matter how long you've been in. It doesn't matter what your rank is. Everybody just, the next question is, who was it? And then we lost a guy, Manuel Sinaceros. He was a Lance Corporal from our comp platoon, and a great guy, a new father too, unfortunately. So that was another rough day, but
yeah. So that's the big unintended consequence. I mean, even I don't know if it's unintended, but unexpected, whatever. For a lot of these guys, obviously, that are getting killed overseas, or the men and women both, but is the families that they leave behind. So you kind of went on, you did your 14 months overseas, or over in Iraq, right? It was 14 months. Yeah. And then you came back and started doing some training in the counterterrorism for the guys that were going out.
Yeah. So after I gotten back, a little while, maybe a few months later, I was augmented to 29 Palms, which is another base out in California. It's actually the largest Marine Corps base. And I was part of a unit called Mojave Viper. That was a training evolution, and it was one of the as units deploy, they have to meet certain requirements. They have to have these checks in the box, and one of those checks is going through Mojave Viper, because what it does is it teaches you how to deal with the civilians. It teaches you how to interact with people and try not to get on CNN, doing something stupid,
Right.
And how to deal with a terrorist threat in the situation. So it's a very important training exercise. I was sent over there just because of the experience I had in my convoy ops, and help with run the insurgency for a while, which was kind of fun. But just teaching these Marines like vehicle inspection and stuff, how to detain people properly so that you're not accidentally causing a really big problem. And it's very culturally, there's so many differences between our society and society in the Middle East. It's very easy to make a big mistake and not even know it. Like, for example, showing the bottom of your shoe or your boot to someone is really a bad thing. It's like basically telling them you're going to kill them. So if you have somebody down on their knees and you're pushing them with your foot or something, that's a big problem. And you have to know these things so you don't accidentally do that. I mean, not that you should be kicking the guy anyway, but I mean, those are the kinds of things that that you can accidentally do that would cause an issue, that we would teach people how not to do that, what to do in these situations, how to do it properly and everything like that. So there wasn't any more Abu Ghraib type experiences there,
Yeah. That's super interesting. Like that cultural disparity that happens, where it's like, like just little things like that you would never even really consider to be like these things. But that's kind of one of those odd concepts of going over into different, environments.
Yeah, so you get your day-to-day, thing in America, and you think that's how life is everywhere, and it's not, and there's different reasons for it. They have different values culturally than we do. It's important to try and understand what those are,
Yeah.
Especially, just knowing who you're around. But yeah, it's something that you can make a pretty big mistake very easily, not even know it, walk away, and then there'll be somebody freaking out about something, and just trying to get every aspect of that covered so you don't do something stupid.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So let's take it back just real quick, because when you were over there, what was kind of the biggest I guess realization to you about being over in a new culture like that? And kind of obviously I think things are probably somewhat controlled and you're used to it, at least from being around the other guys and stuff that have been over there for a while. Maybe they've debriefed you to some degree, but like when you got out there and started engaging in the culture that you never, I don't know, how big was like terrorism back then? That was kind of the beginning of all of the massive crazy stuff, right? I mean,
yeah, it was. That's what made Fallujah such a dangerous place, was because you really had no idea who was who. Conventional battle, America is pretty much the powerhouse of the world, but this is not conventional. It's guerrilla, and it's very difficult. People like that are very, very good at blending in. There was the incident in Haditha is a good example of that. Somebody shot at a Marine convoy out the window and they ran off, and by the time they responded, which is not more than a couple of seconds. And they leveled that room in that building and found out that not only did the guy get away, but he was in the school.
Oh man.
Yeah, and that's the kind of people that you end up fighting. So it's like there's, at least compared to what I was still out growing up and in the military, there's no honor there. There's no, there's no cause for, I don't know, like respecting your own people even to that point. You're using them as shields, and
you're talking about with the enemies, because the people, from what I understand, are actually really great people, like the ones that
I had no problem with the civilian population at all. They were usually pretty happy to see us. We give them food and stuff whenever we could, water. We had very few, even slightly confrontational conflicts. I only took detainees one time, and they were people that should have been detained. So, yeah.
That's crazy, man. So, okay, going back now to the fort, I wanted to touch base on that because I feel like that's important. I'm really trying to get people to understand the kind of stuff that you guys went through mentally, and then why all of this really matters in the first place, right? So, All right, so going back, you did your time training, on the anti-terrorism stuff. You get out, and then you end up going and doing on the reserve side of it for a while, doing cargo stuff, right? Isn't that what it was?
Yeah, so after active duty, I separated and I started going to DePaul University. I moved back to Chicago. And I just, after like a little less than a year, I kind of missed it, but I didn't want to go back to active duty necessarily. So I went to, there's a 2nd Battalion, 24th Marines in Chicago on Foster and Kedzie. That's our unit out here. So I went in there and I reactivated myself into the SMCR, the Select Marine Corps Reserve. And I was a sergeant. That's how I gotten out of active duty as a sergeant. So when I was put into the motor transport platoon, I instantly became the platoon sergeant and the operations chief, because I was one of a few people that had actual, overseas experience and, experience in those positions. But great group of guys, great platoon. I had, a great experience there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So then from there, like you were at, I think, whatever game it was, because I can't remember. Was it a hockey game or something?
Yeah. February 23rd, 2013, I was at a Blackhawks game. And one of the guys that was in my platoon on active duty, a guy that I deployed with, his name is Dave Wilkinson, called me up. And he didn't call me very often, but once in a while he would, ring me up to say, how is it going? So I just kind of hit ignore, because it was too loud in the stadium to hear anything anyways. And he called me right back immediately after that, which was just really strange. So something was up, obviously. So I, excused myself and I went out to the concession area and, I said, hey, what's going on, Wilkes? What's up? And he's like, John, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but John was killed yesterday in Afghanistan. The thing is, they never really refer to each other by our first name. So I'm like, what the hell is John? What are you talking about? And he's like, oh, Sergeant Davis was killed in Afghanistan yesterday. And I just kind of, I don't know, that was the worst call I ever got. I don't know, maybe a couple of moments that I didn't say anything. He had to ask me if I was still there. That was a very important guy in my life. He was my first mentor, somebody I came to respect a lot. Had a very long relationship with that covered a lot of different emotions. But yeah, so he told me that, and I was like, all right, I'll talk to you. I'll give you a call tomorrow. Thanks. And I hung up and I went back and sat down, and I don't remember who played the game. I don't remember how much time was left. I got in the car with it was me, my dad, and one of his friends at the game. And my dad had noticed that I hadn't said a word for like half the game. So on the way back, he asked me, he's like, are you all right, Charlie? And I just said, Sergeant Davis was killed yesterday. And I didn't say anything else. And just like really kind of took all of my composure and not to just completely lose it on the way back. That was a really rough day.
Yeah. Sorry about that, man. But so so next step from that, I don't like, was it his wife or whatever that reached out to you to kind of just ask you to write a letter or something?
Yeah, we were right after his funeral. Tried to keep in touch with them, regularly after that, just to see how everything was going. We were all pretty close friends, and his wife Helena had asked a couple of us that knew him really well, hey, can you just like write a letter to Calvin about John, just because he was 4 years old at the time. And I mean, my memory doesn't work well now, and I'm 34. Yeah. I can't imagine trying to remember something from when I was 4 years old. And as time goes, your memory degrades, and you just don't have anything left of what you used to know about somebody, especially, and that being your father. I can't imagine, what kind of confusion that would cause. So, we all agreed. There's a bunch of us that agreed to do that. And, it sat down to do it, and I just couldn't put words down. I was struggling with trying to be honest and try to figure out, what do you tell a 4-year-old about their dad, that has no idea what's going on. So ended up, just putting it off, and then eventually forgetting about it, which, came back up later on. Felt terrible that it had been so long, but I was talking about John on the anniversary of his death, and I called his wife after I realized that I hadn't written the letter yet, and I said, I'm so sorry that I didn't do this yet. And you always say, like, I'm going to do that for sure. Like, I don't know how many times I've said that in my life, but this was really important to me. So it really messed me up. So I told her, look, I'm so sorry it took so long. I will get this to you by the end of the weekend. I promise. And I did that. But while I was writing it, having a letter is great because it's tangible. You can read it as many times as you want. You can put it away and come back to it later and get something completely different out of it. But to me, it was still too one-dimensional.
Yeah.
So I thought that if I could either record myself either reading the letter or talking about John, to Calvin, that it would be a better communication to just tell him who his father was.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took that idea and I called Helena up like, hey, would you mind if I did this? And she thought that was a great idea. And then I was like, do you think anybody else might want to? And that's kind of where this whole, this new mission that I've kind of undertaken in my life that was the genesis of that.
Yeah. So tell us about that, because that was his son was Calvin, right?
Yep.
And so you've got the organization Dear Calvin Project, and it's awesome. And that's what we kind of met, how we met originally, and then just through the relationship overall. And like kind of let's talk about that, and then just kind of as it went into just what that represents, and kind of what your vision is long term for this thing.
So I believe it's about 2,700 Americans have died or been injured in combat, and to the point where they're not really able to function. That's a lot of families, and losing a parent as a child is such a devastating effect on your life in every way. I have both of my parents. I'm very blessed in that respect. I have a lot of great friends, including yourself with the sweet beard.
Yeah,
I never had to really suffer through that kind of a thing, but I can certainly understand how confusing it would be not to know where you came from, and that's really kind of where I started with it. Writing that thing and telling Calvin about John. I thought maybe other people would want this because they're lost in time. I've always been really big on stories. I love stories. I love telling stories. I love listening to stories. And these people's stories are really, they deserve to be known, especially by the family and the children, and just to give them a sense of who that part of them came from.
So,
because it's not just a question of who my dad is, it's also where's half of me from.
Right.
So that's really, I started doing this for Calvin, and I just, I really kind of, it really kind of took me in. It gave me a real sense of purpose, and after leaving the Marines, I lost a lot of that, for a while, because that was really my identity. I was a Marine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was where, that whole idea came from, and what it means to me is, it's a major part of my life now. I want to make sure that these people's stories are told and they're remembered by their families and everybody else, because they deserve it. They've earned that for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about, the whole experience of that, because you had all of his, the people that served with him fly over. It's where you paid for all of that and kind of got it all set up.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, man.
I didn't want there to be any reason why somebody couldn't come. When I started that process, there was a number of people I contacted. Almost every single person that I contacted was instantly interested in doing it. But there were some issues either with money or time, so getting the logistics down of it, I started calling people in like August, and we didn't actually get to Atlanta, to my friend Dave's place until February of the following year. So it took a while to get a weekend where everyone was available and willing to come out. But I don't know, man. I just really wanted to make sure that it got done right, and so yeah, I ended up saving up for a while, credit cards, and I got the flights for people to come out to Atlanta. We stayed in the hotel rooms. We stayed there for a night or two, and then had a dinner and left. We did all the filming in one day, which was great. The emotion. I have to comment on that because, getting a group of alpha male Marines like that in the same room with each other to actually have genuine emotional responses to questions is not easy. And I give you guys a lot of credit. That was so important too, because it's like you want to make sure that not only are you telling Calvin about his father, but that all of us really loved and cared about him. He was a very important part of our lives, and that's something that we all wanted to make sure Calvin knew. And it was, the video is it's hard for me to watch. I've seen 100 times and I still get choked up sometimes, with that. And the filming process was interesting too. But yeah, one day got it all done and back to our lives. And I had hosted a golf outing in 2017. That was the unveiling of the video for the family. So we showed him that at the golf outing, and it was pretty emotional, but it was a really cool experience.
That's cool. And I'm sure over time y'all have really connected with him too.
Yeah.
The young man kind of stepped in to some degree as kind of being a father figure type role in his life. That's
bunch of uncles. Yeah, that's what that's what Elena says. She's like, he gained a bunch of uncles. It's funny. One of the families, I just got back from Nebraska and they hosted a 5K fundraiser for the organization. I didn't even know they were doing it until they called to ask me after everything was already pretty much said and done, like if I minded. I was like, of course I don't mind. That's awesome,
Yeah.
And Helena and Calvin were there, and a couple of the guys that were in the video were there as well. They made the trip, and I drove from Chicago down to Nebraska, 7.5 hours, but I was so happy to do it.
Yeah.
It was really cool, and it's really kind of a family atmosphere in that respect, and we all look after each other, and that's really what I'm trying to build too, along with just doing these videos, but a culture of people that can come together and lean on each other and find the strength and advice or whatever to support each other, through this kind of an experience. It's so important to get past.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing. So you're doing this now for other families and stuff like that. So that's really cool. What do you think, like from the perspective of the fallen soldiers, but also from the perspective of the Gold Star families and stuff that you work with, like how can the rest of us who maybe didn't serve or, who whatever else, like honor the, just their family and what they did, serving for our country, like in the best way, for the civilians, stuff like that.
There is so much positive support in America for veterans, especially for veterans that have fallen in battle today. I don't know if I would even add anything. I always feel very, appreciated that I've served, and I certainly appreciate the people that were, that would do it too. And I know it's not like it was in Vietnam era, where we come back and everyone hates the soldiers. I think people these days understand that politics aside, they have nothing to do with military action. Decisions, yes, but not the day-to-day action. It's not what we do. You follow orders, you do your job, and you do the best you can to try and better yourself as a person and as a Marine, sailor, soldier, airman. I don't think that there is, maybe just, I would say just to listen to the stories and remember, and think about that, like maybe on Memorial Day or whatever, if you have an opportunity to help somebody out, do it. But I always feel very appreciated, which is really nice, but it's, for me, like being in the Marines was a job, it was something I did, I had my own, choice about doing it. So I've always overwhelmed with the positive support, but it's really nice. I appreciate that a lot. I know a lot of the guys do too.
That's cool, man. So as far as like everything that you're doing right now, they can go to dearcalvinproject.com. Is that kind of primarily where you send people whenever they're kind of wanting to get involved to learn more?
Yeah, I send them either to that website or to our Facebook page. It's a little bit easier to get on there and just look at the posts and stuff like that and join the group. And you can follow, like, share, and donate if they choose. Every dollar helps, but
sure.
just trying to refine the website and get it to a really good, I have to build up a library of videos as well. But I'm excited. There's a couple of things that I'm, going to add into that Dear Calvin part of it. And then, to continue it to the Survived Inc., which is the larger organization.
Yeah.
That's all like kind of on the up. I'm really running into shoulder into it, at this point, like going 100%. So just trying to really make that my focus and, of all of my effort and drive.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate everything that you're doing. Obviously we talked a lot about it, and when you get down here, because you're kind of uprooting coming down to Texas, which I think is a really smart move for you. But just being able to get you plugged in and being able to make even bigger impact, because there's a lot of organizations down here that are serving Gold Star families. So I think what you do would be a great type of a segue into like kind of even partnership stuff like that. So for everybody watching right now too, just go to Dear Calvin Project, take a look at what is happening within that organization, and just what Charlie's doing there. And like if you feel led, to donate some cash, that's obviously it's going to be used in a great way to help kind of take, the legacy of somebody who's not there, to kind of fulfill it outside of a few pictures within the home from the people who spent some of the last moments, of their lives with them, and really, I think, if I were a child in that environment, I think, how special that would be, to be able to have something like that, where you've got so many people that you look up to as a child, sitting there talking about who your mother or father was, and what they meant to them. So that's cool, man. I love the creativity in that for what you did there. And so appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to be on and all that you're doing, man. And anything else, like where they can find you on Facebook and stuff too, right?
Yeah, you can, if you wanted to reach out, or if you have a family to nominate, or if you wanted to request a video too, you can email me at cjones@yourcalvinproject.com. Go on the website. We have a form to fill out, and I will be in touch with you as soon as I possibly can. I want to get these projects going and really start getting this mission on a good march pace forward. I mean, everybody that supports the organization, I can't say no thank you enough times. Like I said, we had that fundraiser, in a town of 1,411 people, over 70 showed up, which is a lot, for that. So that was really cool. It was really kind of inspired. It really got my engine running again, as far as motivation goes. And coming down to Texas, man, I can't wait to get there and really just start putting everything I got into it, and hopefully I can get this thing off the ground and helping a lot of families out there, remember, and, helping them with whatever they need, as, being the victims of such terrible outcomes from the horrors of war.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, after Memorial Day, man, hopefully people kind of begin to look at that and see it for what it is, because it's not always, like I think we say never forget, man, but it's kind of like this is a way to actually not do that. So dude, it's awesome, man. Well, guys, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Charles, again, thank you again for being here, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Oh, my pleasure, man. It was awesome. So you guys have a wonderful day, and I appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.